Okay, now we're gonna start the meeting. We do have a quorum here. I think we're expecting one more member. So welcome to the May 7th, 2024 meeting of the 2229 Main Street Advisory Task Force. I'm your chair, Paul Bohm. And the agenda is on the screen right now, but let me call the roll to start. Rich Feely.
Here,
Carl Seidman,
belatedly.
here. Court Booth.
Here.
Harry Flood.
Here,
And Paul Bohm, I am here. We have a quorum, expecting one more member. I know that Kurt, Pam, and Gary are all moving targets at various places, so they won't be with us tonight. Okay, first order of business are the minutes. Let me clarify a couple of things on the minutes. There are two sets of minutes from the last meeting. We're going to defer the review and approval of the executive session minutes. We have sent it to town council for factual review of that, and so when we get any edits back from him, we'll recirculate that around. Meanwhile, if you do have comments on existing executive session minutes, please get them to Rich. So we're going to defer that. But the regular meeting minutes are, I don't know if you got, there's a revised version of those minutes. I can put those on the screen.
Yeah, the only revision is the one as to the proper format for going into executive session. Thanks, Chris.
Right, that's the only, so this is the old
if
version.
that's the only change, then I'll,
So the new version is on the screen, which is just at the end. Which advice, I got the language straight here in terms of going into the executive session. So that's the only change in the regular minutes. Any comments, or do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Thank you for pointing out that that was the only change, because I hadn't had time to look at the revised ones.
It is the only change. It's a short minutes, as was the meeting. Let me go around, roll call for approval. Rich,
Aye.
Carl,
Aye.
Court,
Aye.
Carrie,
Aye.
and Paul, I approve. So we unanimously approve the minutes of the regular meeting on the 25th of April. Okay, I want to flip the agenda a little bit. I want to talk about the FinCom discussion I had right after our last meeting. I have a slide in the deck, which scroll down here, which is the slide that I showed to FinCom. They asked me to attend and brief them on our progress, and I figured they might be interested in some of the financial pieces. So this is in your meeting deck. So this is what I showed them. This is what I talked about. Basically, I said we were looking at financial aspects in the following categories. What's it going to cost, if anything, to acquire the site? In terms of the reuse and development, I said we are moving probably no further than looking at the infrastructure development to support any and all uses. I call that site preparation. We are looking at the cost of town ownership, meeting obligations, insurance, probably managing institutional controls. And then looking at estimates of costs to the town if the site is privately acquired. I think these are categories, Carl, that more or less that you discussed last time. I wasn't prepared to give any numbers, because we're not prepared to give any numbers. I did notice that it's to just prepare the site for reuse is going to be several $1 million probably for roads and other infrastructure. But beyond that, we don't have any estimates. As far as the acquisition costs, those are going to depend on negotiations. Yes. And the mode of acquisition, which we haven't determined yet. And frankly, I said they could range from zero to significant costs, and we won't know that until actual negotiations take place. So, and we are on track for developing the recommendations by the end of October. I got two sets of questions. One on the reuse, because I mentioned we were presenting various scenarios for reuse. And I was asked the question, well, are you guys going to come up with a preferred specific reuse plan? And if so, how are you gonna come up with that? And I deferred. I said, we haven't decided. We have reuse scenarios right now. They're pending the risk analysis, and I think we're gonna have to revisit. And maybe we'll start talking about that tonight, whether we want to go further and recommend a preferred mix under municipal ownership. I didn't commit to the task force doing anything along those lines. I just said it's under discussion whether we just present various scenarios or we want to hone in on a specific plan. So that was one line. The second line was on revenue generation. I think there was more than a few comments on the need to generate revenues from the site and, what was our thinking about revenue generation. And I said, we are thinking about revenue generation in various circumstances, but, and we will take that forward probably in our report to come up with somehow with estimates of revenue generation in various scenarios. I didn't take any further than that, but I got the strong sense that they and others want to see the likelihood or possibility of revenue generation on the site as opposed to complete municipal use. And I think we still have to discuss that because we haven't converged on that as well.
I thought that was a general sentiment, but I don't think it was a really explicit one. And I was pleased that they didn't push you for details that you didn't have. They know that this thing is, at this point in time, uncertain for a lot of very appropriate reasons.
And they're looking at this in the context of their 5-year projection on continuing increases to the property tax version that is above what we'd like to see.
Yeah,
And
I did get into a little bit on timing. I said our recommendations are going to be of the nature to advise the select board on whether to proceed down the path towards acquisition. But we can't decide, the select board can't decide whether to acquire or not until various uncertainties are ironed out. And we can't project any capital plans until specific reuse planning takes place. And specific reuse planning, we're not going to try and do that. I would advise the select board, if you want to proceed, that part of what has to happen next is the planning. How is the site going to be used versus other sites? And that question has come up a number of times. I'm not sure FinCom talked about MCI Concord, but I've been asked about, how do we plan versus other sites? And I said, that's not our charge. Our charge is to look at the site, the possibilities, and that, the next phase of some activity will be to blend this planning into a larger town planning. And I gather, I don't speak to the select board. The select board is on line with doing that at some point, that the need for that larger planning. So I think that's all that I'm just, those are the main topics that came up. Carl.
Well, I mean, revenue generation is, I guess, at least 10 years away.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, so I don't know what the FinCom's financial planning time frame is, but it's, it's not going to affect them in the next 5 is probably not 10 years. So.
Certainly true. I think-
and revenue generation should be looked at, potential revenue generation relative to what cost the town will incur for the needs that are real over that similar period of time, which is not just the next few years. Right?
And to follow on that, I think the FinComs, I think I can say with confidence that their big question is, how does this fit into our capital plan?
Mhm.
Because they
Yeah.
know that precedes any revenue generation, and they're very, very eager to see us on the town and school side shape up our projections.
Mhm.
Yeah. I told Parashar even before the meeting, I didn't want to disappoint them, but we could throw out big numbers, which would be meaningless, but also they're beyond a 5-year capital planning period, because I think I did mention timing, we'll talk about that tonight. The site won't be developed by anybody probably until 2027, 2028.
Well,
And so that's kind of,
and that's when the site's gonna be cleaned up around.
Yeah,
twenty
and
twenty
it
eight.
won't be, if it's revenue generating,
then-
it won't be
Then
generating
you have to-
revenue in
right, I
28.
mean, then you have to build, you
Yeah.
have to put in the infrastructure, you have to build something. You have to raise the financing to build it, it's gonna take at least 2 years after.
Yeah.
And probably longer, cause there has to be some, some RFP process or some process by which it gets, conveyed and put out to bid and all that type of stuff, so.
but I think it's incumbent upon us talk about the spirit of revenue generation,
Right,
what the
yeah.
types of, and we've done enough, you guys have done enough conversation with private developers and others that we know there are possibilities.
Yeah.
And maybe there'll be other possibilities
what-
for other.
Yeah, I
revenue
mean, I'm
generation.
planning to look at the assessed valuations of, some of the multifamily. Some, of the relatively large multifamily housing projects, so that. I could apply a per unit assessed valuation to scenario one. And under current tax rates, estimate. A range of revenue that would bring in, I mean, that
And-
wouldn't be hard to do.
Don't forget to compare it to what the increased cost
Yeah,
will be for providing.
Yeah, right, well, yeah, and, the only complication
it's
there is not
education.
knowing what the school impact will be 10 years from now, but at least
Yeah.
compared to what we have, yeah. And
Yeah,
that's
well-
probably enough to bond, that's probably enough to bond. To cover the bonding of the infrastructure is my guess, but I haven't run the numbers yet, but I can do that for the next meeting. It wouldn't be.
Yeah, I think the one thing we gotta be careful, what they really want is, tax-paying development that doesn't generate kids. And, what we heard from the developers is
Yeah.
that's not what and frankly, if anybody wants to develop something, it's gonna be a piece of
Right.
for commercial, it's gonna
Right.
be a
Yeah.
piece of MCI
Which
content,
we did not
which is
have,
much better located.
when this committee was charged. That wasn't in the picture.
Yeah, but it may point us though, if you think about to maybe one of the scenarios. And look, we have to decide whether we're gonna come up with a preferred scenario or just lay it out there, but the scenario of a municipal acquisition with leasing back to, leasing parts of the property to revenue generating activities. Could be a blend. I mean,
Yeah.
a total municipal use is probably not gonna generate revenue. Private acquisition generate revenue, but it takes away opportunity. So, I think we're gonna have to, next few months, kind of balance these balls. Yes.
So I think that
Yeah.
the one revenue generating stream you haven't looked at is the idea of moving a municipal facility from an area that could be like here. We have a
Right.
lot of area that could be either housing or commercial. And if the facilities over here moved to the StarMet site, then there would be no superfund limits on how revenue sharing for this space. And Peabody School is also in that perspective where you might have some municipal use for that after the school is done for a few years and then build something somewhere else, and rather than having to rebuild Peabody for another use, sell it off as residential properties there.
It could be
And
a-
both of those areas could potentially save the town a lot of money.
We have with Peabody a swing location where we could, move the puzzle pieces around, without having to acquire or rent property.
Yeah, I think in this reports, dipping our toe into the multi-site planning, because what you're talking about is multi-site planning. If you move here. Yeah, I think we'd be foolish to ignore it totally, but that's not our job to kind of,
It's not in our chart.
it's not in our chart, but that's
But
okay.
as we are pursuing what is in our charge, it's hard to ignore.
I agree.
these other-
Exactly. It's hard to ignore it, and I think
other things.
we have to make some attempt to discuss it.
I think we can certainly have our options, the menu. We could even have the 2024 pros and cons of various options, but then I'd prefer to put a hard stop right there because 2028 in some, from some perspectives is a long way away. And so for us to lock in on
Right.
the preferred with all these surrounding unknowns, I think, isn't really gonna help us. In fact, it might even preclude creative thinking about those other sites.
David,
My apologies for getting involved in a phone call and forgetting. I ran into Mary Hartman on a walk the other day and we had a conversation about this. She asked me, how's the thing going? And in the course of the conversation, I mentioned that we were doing tons of research on all sorts of possibilities. I think I said something vague like that. And she said, so you're going beyond just the should we or shouldn't we acquire? And I said, well, yeah, because if we acquire, there's all kinds of implications to how we acquire, what we use it for, what it might elsewise be used for. And she was very appreciative of that.
Well, it is in the charge.
She was very appreciative of that, but liked how we were thinking about it as of the last meeting, which is what we kind of just discussed. I'm just relaying what the incoming chair of the select board, who we're gonna report to, said. We're giving them some options, but not the options, not the details on everything. They have lots of land use planning balls in the air. They like their choice being framed in a guided direction, but not a dictated direction. The three scenarios or four, and the way you said, it'll be written up in the report, which is here are three, but by no means are they the only ones, where they're just ways that we have asked the questions that we needed to ask so that you can get more specific answers.
Yeah.
So that was the feedback.
yeah, but. Well, we have to talk about this a lot more. I think we have to. I think Rich and Gary did a great job in interviews and the scenarios, but I feel we have to put our best thinking into, okay, how do we take that construct and make some. I'd call them best recommendations, best guesses, thoughtful. Because, whether they're off base or not, I think I'd like to see us think about, okay. What do we think is the best combination of things based on what we've heard? Not the only, but.
No.
Yeah, I think we
In
should,
order
we
to-
can frame it that way.
I think
Pardon
people would like our
me.
thinking.
I
on
think that, well, my sense from her in this conversation was, while they'd like that, she at first was taken aback that we were going to be starting to frame the choices of how to use it. And so, rather than a strong recommendation, it's the wording, it's the semantics. I agree that our wisdom will help be a guide to them, because you have looked into this more. But I think they're waiting for general guidance as opposed to what sounds like lobbying for A or B or C.
Mhm.
I don't think we should lobby, but we've done more research, we talked to more people, we have more informed judgment about this
Yeah.
site than anybody else, so why not
Share that.
put some aspect, share that judgment, yeah.
I don't disagree with that, but I wanna really emphasize the idea that we shouldn't go too far, because you might have been puzzled when I said 2028 is a long way away. Because in many respects, it'll be here in a heartbeat. But think about it this way also. 4 years ago, did we know we were gonna have a Peabody available? No. Did we know there was gonna be an MBTA Communities Act? No. Did we know we were gonna be staring down the barrel of Prop 2.5 overrides? No. So things can change very quickly.
We did know we would be coming up against 40B limits, which we've been bouncing off of for,
Yes,
long
we
time.
did. True.
But-
Yeah, and we've temporarily satisfied them and.
Mhm.
And
But
maybe,
nonetheless, my point is, external circumstances are gonna factor
Absolutely.
largely into what happens.
Who's in charge of the EPA could change in November.
I'm also concerned how robust a community engagement process will have around the use options, and we'll have a better sense, I guess, but
Yeah.
we haven't really had a conversation, around the use options in which we've had any significant community input. And
We
so I think
haven't.
that's another
we're just
question.
starting,
about-
this is deliberation, early deliberations. I see Terry has raised her hand, well, let's talk about the select board, probably has got interested. Terry?
Yeah, thank you. I have three comments quickly. Going back to the land use plan. I think I'm certainly going to be advocating for that this year, and I've talked to at least one other select board member, and, I think we are going to put together a land use plan. And then secondly, I'm going to be meeting with Cynthia Rainey from the school committee, and we're going to go over the capital planning process and fix the bugs in it and amend it so that we have a better process this year, and we're already meeting on that this week. And then finally, in terms of your discussion with the FinCom, the only thing that I was thinking about was that any revenue generated is, we should call it net revenue, because don't forget, the EPA might want a piece of it. So when we negotiate with them, we're going to want to be talking about net revenue. Like, if we have to spend $4 million building roads, we need to subtract that off first.
That's a good point. It is net revenue, and we don't have the parameters of what
And
that looks like.
we don't know if tax revenue is something they're considering as something they would put a claim on as opposed to
Well-
lease or sale revenue.
Well, yes, and that came up if we acquire the whole site for whatever multiple steps and then sell part of it, the EPA may want that money.
The sales proceeds,
Yeah.
but not the tax revenue.
Yeah,
Right,
that
right,
was my
right,
understanding. It was
right.
only part of
Yeah.
the sale price.
Okay, good, we're gonna have a lot more conversation here and, on how we proceed, but I think this is good start, and, I think there's a lot of interest. Speaking of a lot of interest, let's discuss the public forum. So, what I want to do is, so the public forum is scheduled on June 4th. It's in the townhouse. I thought for a minute, we might want to have it at Harvey Wheeler, but on second thought, we should probably have it in the center of town so that the whole town is, so that's, I've started talking with both Chris and Donna McIntosh about some publicity. I'm going to get into that in a minute. But what I've done is, I prepared the slide deck, and it's the first shot, and we don't have to decide on, we've got a month to figure it out. I just wanted to just go through those quickly. The intent here is to keep this pretty high level on the, remember, we're following up on what we said we were going to do along the various lines, and I wanted to talk about what we've learned. And so this is, I think I have about 20 slides. Do not feel you have to have your final comments here. You can think about this, but I just want to go through this slide by slide. So what we're going to talk about is just, and I think subject to your comments, that I would present this, and then you guys would field questions and comments, or you could add on to it. I think it's gonna be a little awkward to go back and forth on this, but we could split this up, but it feels a little easier to do it like that. Can I go through this then?
Yeah, just process. Do you want us to stop with each chat about each slide or go through it?
No, I'm gonna go through it.
In
then
its
let's-
entirety,
we'll
okay.
We'll go back,
Thank
so,
you.
because I want, and
Yeah, because the last time it was an hour and a half going through to get to slide 4.
my intent is to use this same slide deck at the select board briefing, or some modified, so this is kind of the high level. And the reason why I have a couple of background things in here is because there are new select board members, and I want to do a little bit of background. So whether it's a public forum or the select board, just want to remind people that we had a public forum on November 9th. We talked about site history, what our charge was, how we were organized, the key questions we were trying to answer, and then how we were going to collect information. I just have one slide on the location surrounding properties. I think we need to just remind people where this is. I did add this little bubble down here, Rich. This proposed 40B housing development wasn't on the radar.
No, I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, what's that?
I think it's appropriate to show.
Yeah,
it.
Yeah.
that's there. So I mean, and I drew this little line through the site, just to indicate that part of the site is sort of conservation area, and part of it's for development, just in general. So we don't have 46 acres developable land. We have more like 20 plus. So that, that's pretty high level where the site is. I abbreviated this. I think the important bullet is the last one. The first two bullets are right out of the charge, Our charge is to recommend to the select board whether we should acquire the property or not, and we should consider uses of the site, risk, liability, et cetera. But I think it's important for the public and for the select board to understand in reality, what we're gonna recommend is only whether or not the select board should move forward towards acquisition. That is, initiate negotiations and further planning. It is not because select board is not gonna be in a position to say, oh yeah, we're gonna acquire it. But they have to commit to kind of moving forward with legal negotiate, all the things we're gonna be talking about. And so we understand the financial aspects of the site, we understand what we're gonna do with the site. So, and why? Because there are uncertainties that have to be resolved through negotiations and planning in order for the select board to actually decide at some point in the future to acquire the site. I think that's important. So, and I think the public should know that in October 31st, we're not gonna, while we may see thumbs up or thumbs down on moving forward, it's not to actually sign on a dotted line. So I'm just gonna present one slide on each one of these and what we've learned. I started with the reuse on this. I pulled this out of your presentation that we had a master plan, and what's common to all the various scenarios that have been developed, and I'll go to that in a minute, that certain uses of the site, the conservation area, a pollinator meadow, of transportation mode. These are the numbers on them. And I won't go as fast as this during the presentation. And then to widen the corridor, the conservation corridor adjacent to site 8-4. These are 8-4. These are all common to the plan. Now I've taken a little liberty in the next few slides, Rich. So taking the master plan, several scenarios have been developed. I flipped these around a little bit because I think we need to present the municipal acquisition first. And then the private acquisition is a possibility. So I actually added one scenario to this. Again, you have to disagree or agree, but I wanted to tell you why I did that. Scenario one is town acquires and uses it entirely for municipal purposes. Scenario two, the town acquires and facilitates some private use through leasing, so there's some revenue generation there. Those are largely the two high-level scenarios of the municipal acquisition. If the town chooses not to acquire the site, the private sector acquires the site and may, through some sort of negotiation, allow or facilitate some limited town use. We don't know the parameters around it. It depends on lots of negotiations and a private sale, which, but that, that's a possibility, and you guys have indicated that. But scenario four is the private sector acquires a site and doesn't allow the town to do anything, but we do have some influence and constraints using zoning, zoning,
Yes, right.
zooming,
Been to one
zoning
too many Zoom meetings.
and bylaws. So I think
Well,
those,
select board, you're on mute.
so, those, and at this point, and I'll make the point, we haven't, the task force has not come up with a preferred specific use. However, there are various sub-uses, and this may be too complicated, but under scenario one, for example, where the town acquires and uses entirely for municipal purposes, there are lots of different scenarios, just recreation, solar field, community center, then there's DPW location, so there's lots of different mixes and matches, sub-scenarios, as that can come out of scenario one. And I don't have, the scenario 1C, 1D, there are lots of different mixes of municipal uses. And the task force has not gone further in coming up with a preferred use at this time, given municipal acquisition. Scenario two, so the town acquires it, and there could be some leasing for housing or recreational facilities built by others. The town could use it for DPW, town offices, also leased for housing, so that's the private leasing part, and there are sub scenarios to that as well. I didn't go into any more detail on 3 and 4. I just think it was important to kind of flesh out the scenario 1 and 2, Rich, a little bit, and I discussed this with Gary, so just to indicate there are lots of possibilities here.
I just have one comment on scenarios 3 and 4. I think the distinction between them is whether there's town use or not. The
Right.
town will influence and constrain via zooming and bylaws under both scenario 3 and 4.
You're right, and,
Yeah.
and when you send me comments.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just kind of running through this. Okay, so what have we learned?
But
Yes,
since he interrupted.
yes,
With,
sorry. Go
go
ahead.
back to the leasing for housing. Is that land lease or is that constructing the housing in the way you are presenting it here? Would it
I
be
think the town would
constructed
lease it to a
rent or-
private developer.
Yeah, okay, leases the land,
Yeah.
Yes.
okay.
lease-
You
So
have these
maybe just
slides
to-
numbered so that I can make my notes.
This is
accordingly.
10.
Thank you.
Maybe just insert the
Yeah,
word land.
If you look at a
in
little
leasing.
lower right-hand corner.
Yeah,
it's-
Couldn't see it.
It's
Thank
too
you.
small.
It's small.
Land lease for housing.
And then I have a really kind of high level, so taking sort of the structure of what we talked about last week. We have looked at current ownership and title search. And I think these are publicly known things. Essentially, there are no active owners of the site. There's a large federal lien and one private mortgage to be negotiated. TPN is to be negotiated. Town will be negotiating with EPA and DOJ in terms of acquisition, should it decide to do so. So that's the ownership and title search. The acquisition, the multiple methods available. The liens and mortgages likely to be forgiven or negotiated to the benefit of the town, we think. Based on what we've heard, that there's a possibility, especially the federal lien. The acquisition cost, if any, we don't know, it's to be negotiated. But as far as liability protection, which is the third area, the multiple means to protect the town from. And I think the public would be interested in this, to protect the town from liability from past contamination, from what I call legacy operations. And protection against responsibility for any claims related to past operations that has to be negotiated. But we can be protected from the past. And this liability protection is central to any agreement we negotiate with EPA to be negotiated. The fourth area, we've looked at property ownership. The rights of ownership have to TBN to be negotiated. The town does have ownership responsibilities to ensure that the remediation structures are not disturbed. The town will need to have permitting, control and inspections and strictly guard against future problems as part of permitting and inspections. There won't be any use of groundwater, and insurance policy will guard against future liability created by the town's uses. So the future liability is protected by insurance, the past liability is protected by negotiation. So I don't know if we can say anything less than that, Court. But let's get back to that in a minute. So I put the big to be confirmed here because we haven't been briefed on Rue's work, but so we can wait till the 28th to fill this in. And but take a look at it. Right now, what I see, what Rue's finding that if the site is cleaned up as required, that basically there are no incremental risks from the operations that'll be left. You'll see in Rue's analysis that, you know, there is this background uranium, you know, that there's background risks in the entire area.
Mhm.
That they're, you know, we'll see how they handle that in the report. So there's just one slide on this, and it's a big to be confirmed. Ownership and operations, I pulled on the financial, Carl, the things we're looking at, this comes right out of the FinCom. Just say, we're looking at these, you know, these three areas. We're looking at estimates of cost to the town if it's privately acquired in terms of police and fire costs and oversight of development. And that responsibilities of ownership, if we acquire, include institutional controls and use restrictions. I should also add probably regulatory compliance as well to those. So that's, I think, what we can say about that. And so those are the four areas. So the update, what we say, I just have a couple of slides here. We're on track for recommendations by mid-fall. I don't know if we want to use this because it might be confusing, but I think this next one is, these key future dates are interesting as I put them down there. So October 31st, the task force submits its report. And these are just kind of best guesses. So somewhere in the first half of next year, the select board considers our recommendations. If the recommendations to acquire the site, the select board then decides to move forward on negotiations and further information gathering. So they started another process, right, towards acquisition. Somewhere between 2025 and 6 and 7, the negotiations with EPA and DOJ that I've talked about. During that same period, there's planning for reuse and budgeting. The town can take ownership of the site probably late, this is probably optimistic, probably more 2027, 2028. Late 27, 28 is when EPA basically says the site can be ready for anticipated use. The town can take ownership before that. Whether they want to do that or not, it's probably possible to take ownership earlier, but the town could also wait till they get the Swaru site wide ready for anticipated use. Only then, 2028, can the first steps of reuse and development begin. 2029-30 reuse begins, then I thought EPA continues to monitor the site beyond that and continue to operate at the site. This would probably look better as a timeline, but I thought these for the public to realize that the site is really not going to be available for reuse until 2028, and the town and the select board really doesn't have to acquire it until at the latest that point, or never, you know. I think these days, so we can clean these up, but I thought that this was probably a better time block than this.
One quick, very quick addition here, and I'll put it in my notes
Yeah.
for you too. Remember, we had discussed that our research has indicated that the sooner the town gets involved in moving toward possible acquisition, the better in terms of maximizing its influence on the remaining work. So that probably is a point to make while you're presenting that slide. In our recommendations, we'll say that, we talked about saying that. So in terms of, you know, you're proposing that maybe by early 25, if the recommendation is to acquire the site or somewhere in there, this general point, I just wanted
Yeah,
to
I think.
remind us that we
Given
kind
that
of agreed
people
that.
who will look back at the presentation, you know, the handout, the slide deck. I think it might be worth actually putting it in reference in the text there.
I'll
to
add
that
this in my
effect.
notes. I just wanted
Yeah.
to mention it.
Look at, this is really,
Preliminary.
this is really rough. I thought this is
Understood.
just, I want to let you know what I thought was an appropriate level
Mhm.
of detail in here, and so now shoot away, or we can wait, we can discuss this again at the next meeting.
What happens after the presentation?
Okay,
What happens after the presentation? How are we thinking of structuring?
I think
The
we're gonna
meeting,
take,
but
we're gonna take questions,
Just take question and answer. We're not gonna-
unless you wanna, add something, I don't
Well, at
know.
one point, we talked about possibly breaking out by separate or themes. I'm not necessarily advocating that, but
Well,
it's,
I don't know,
Yeah.
if there are 50 people there, it might be good if there are 10 people there. It's
Yeah.
hard, we may have to make a field decision,
Mhm.
we have to huddle
Mhm.
and say, what do we do next? But in general, should we open it up for questions and discussion right after this, or do you wanna, is there more to add?
questions from the board first, or maybe you ask, to the committee that's there, toward the task force.
Yeah.
Did I miss anything?
Or Deb, anything else, and
You know,
you may have thought some things during the presentation that, and I think it'd be appropriate for you to add. Pieces to it.
And there may be some sort of facial cues that we get from the board that maybe we did need to say a little bit more there, or maybe, were they really understanding?
well, maybe one possibility is if it is general questions and answers, we break down the question and answer session by topic so that there's sort of focused questions and answers on each subject area as opposed to you know, bouncing around randomly.
There will be people there with specific areas of interest.
Yeah, I
Right, right,
agree.
so I think.
So there's a
that's- yeah.
whole, you know, you can open the floor and say, we're open to any questions, anything, but to keep the meeting productive, we're gonna focus the first set of questions on
I like
pick a
that.
topic, liability, risk, whatever, you know, and then if a question comes up that's outside that, you direct them
Yeah.
to, please say that, we want that question, but the next group is gonna be talking about that.
Yeah.
And just shepherd the meeting through by topic,
So,
work there.
on one hand, we have a month, but on the other hand, we only have really one more meeting.
Right.
On the 28th, and the meeting will not be totally taken up with the risk. I think the two topics, the next meeting will be the form and the risk discussion. So I'd like to kind of. Yeah, you think about it and how to structure this. Between now and then, I invite, starting now, I invite comments on this, and I think, Terry, hold on a second, I just want to see if anybody.
I've got one, maybe I missed it, but I don't think you ever said that. The reuse people had looked at or had reached out to commercial use and found no interest.
Yeah,
Because I think that's a
I think we
question
gotta
other
say
people
that.
will
yeah.
ask.
I
but
was more
think we
going
should-
through the slides rather than
No,
just.
I think we should have a bullet about that in there somewhere.
Exactly, and I think with each one of these slides, I think.
Yeah, I think you can say current private sector interest focused on housing or something.
Right.
Well,
Yes.
and the same on
Not
the ownership,
commercial.
we talked to a lot of communities and
Mhm.
I think I have to say a little bit, I didn't want to have separate slides on the research, but I think. Unless you think it's needed.
Well, that's the only thing I'm wondering is, will what we've learned have more legitimacy if we spend a little time explaining what we did to get to that learning?
Yes, possibly.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
And that adheres to the trust in our product.
Yeah,
The
Right.
people, that's based on the response to our previous presentation where we did that and all our credentials and so forth, and the feedback to that was, it looks like you guys are really serious and really a trustworthy group in terms of expertise. Explaining how we got to the answers that we're offering is probably
so maybe we need
Having the three.
one other, before each of these, what we found, I think, sort of who we talked to, maybe this.
how we
learned,
ask the
maybe
questions we
Maybe there's
ask.
4 more
what we-
slides
yeah.
that,
Right.
please feel free to add slides
Key
to it. and
activities or
edit.
milestones for the
Right.
4 streams
Mhm.
thus
Yeah.
far.
Whatever you think is best
Pam's got it,
to
I
explain.
got it.
I
And
want
so is Terry.
I want
the
to
select
ask
person.
Terry, hi. Go
Hi,
ahead.
so these look really good. One big consideration is you have a lot of words on some of these slides. And I know you're trying to figure out which room, which building to have it. I think you should, have somebody like Chris test it and see if it's legible. It might be more legible on the screen in Harvey Wheeler, or it might be more legible on the screen in the town hall. But we have had some trouble, of the audience. Yeah, like that slide right there, I think is too small, for the town hall, but I'm not sure. I think you should test it. Or you could have handouts as well as projecting it. And then.
Yeah,
Um,
I think,
But that only works for people who are actually physically there. It doesn't help for the people who are watching from
Right.
home
But the-
when it's live.
there are a lot of words on here. These are the same slide. This one was the same slide we used at the last meeting. It's hard to talk about the charge with.
I think it was too small at that last meeting, if I recall, but I think we should test it. Also, I'll send you a couple of comments of things that I think need to go on the map in the beginning, like where Route 62 is and where the solar panels are, where the cell tower might go, and things that people were complaining at town meeting. I don't know where this is. I don't know where that is. I'll send you that. But on slide 12, I think we need to explain.
Of the liability.
The second bullet, protection against responsibility for claims related to past operation. I think you have to be very specific that you're talking about chemicals that haven't been, that were created by the legacy operation, but they haven't been legally.
Identified.
Yeah, I
known
took-
and unknown.
No, yeah.
Yep,
Yeah, maybe just parentheses, no.
hey, please send me the comment, I'm gonna write that down, but please send me the comments, so, and, so we're gonna have one more. We'll review this and finalize it at the next meeting, but, we could have a totally separate meeting, we could plug in a Zoom meeting just to go over this, but, go ahead, Gordon.
I'm thinking of the person who is coming to this forum to look at this for the very first time. Because I think they're gonna come at it in a very different way than somebody who's had any history with it at all. First slide refers to follow-up, as if it's a singular follow-up, and people might not understand there's a long string of public activity. So I think that's gotta be clear to people that it's not one single follow-on and we're done. I'm
There's a line
guessing.
with site history there and slide number, whatever that is.
Mhm.
Well, yeah,
Possible to mention, towns had a lot of public input from, Pam's oversight and back to crew, things that you've said before.
yeah, I
Saying that we're way down the road in a process rather
Yeah,
than.
I mean, this is a difficult slide for someone who's new to the issue
Right.
as the first slide.
How many people are gonna be
I
new to
just
the
didn't
issue?
want to repeat the,
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of good slides in the last one, which talked about the town involvement, I think,
So
so
you
think
just
about,
need something to introduce the overall
yeah.
issue, what we're working on, because it's just, this sort of assumes almost that you were here on the. You've joining a conversation that you're already part of.
We don't have the RU material, but I think those newcomers are gonna, some of them are gonna have health first and foremost on their minds, and so I think.
Some of the old ones too.
Yeah, so I think let's not, if we
Give them a couple of
de-emphasize
names.
that, people will assume we have some kind of agenda that's not a good agenda, and that's not true.
De-emphasize what?
If we
Nope.
don't, if we don't, if we're not thorough with the health implications such as we know it, I fear that people would think we're ducking it. So I'd rather try to be as comprehensive as we can be.
Yeah, that's why, so I have this one slide now, let's wait till we
Yeah,
get to.
exactly. I know we have to wait for Rue.
Yeah,
I understand.
I
And
also
then-
have some thoughts about the risk slide specifically, but I can send them to you.
And then finally, I really have reservations about allowing anybody to think that revenue generation is a significant part of this. I just don't think it's realistic. I don't want somebody to hang their hat on that hope. We have so many costs between now and then.
Well, the only statement, the only mention of revenue generation is on this.
No, I know. I'm just saying, I'm not criticizing you or your presentation. I'm simply saying we need to manage expectations.
Oh,
That's all.
in general,
Pam is like bursting at the seams to want to say something, yeah.
okay,
I
Don't
think that one
slow.
of the ways you could do the history and the revenue generation rethink is by doing a slide on the realities of revenue generation at this site, and you can talk about municipal being maybe offset by other sites, municipal being something where you have some kind of lease facility that's used on the site. You can talk about the problems you had finding people who might want to do commercial development at this site, that's not what people want to do. They want to do things that are more
Mhm.
residential and do that. And that gives you a chance to say, here's things we've already done and already determined, because we do have a sense of those pieces of information. And that gives you a chance to explain how the government would share in sales.
That makes me think that we might want to have a set of slides, not that go into the presentation you make, Paul, but in anticipation of questions that people will ask.
Thank you for asking that question
Yeah.
in slide.
Thank you, and here it
So
is.
that,
Here
like,
you
that's
go.
a slide I don't
think
think we need
I was
in the
gonna say
presentation.
exactly that, I'd rather, if somebody has a burning question, we should answer, maybe have a slide, so yeah.
Right, anticipate them.
Maybe there are like 10 other
Right,
backup slides,
Yeah.
But,
What I-
but
what I want-
revenue, thinking about how
Right.
revenue is practical or impractical, when we've
Right.
learned stuff about that.
But we do have to be equivocal, as Court said, to set expectations realistically.
Well, that's the point, actually,
Of the
of the
slide.
whole slide.
Mm,
yeah, I don't know, from I know FinCom was interested in revenue. I'm not sure if the public's interested, they should ask that question.
Well, they'll ask a
Right.
cost
I think they'll
question,
be-
we're at the other side of the.
They
same-
ask the cost
But it's
They're interested
part,
in
it's the
coming
other
to the
side of the
meeting.
same overall question.
Well, fiscal
Now,
impact, they'll be
Yeah.
concerned
fiscal
about the
impact,
overall
right,
fiscal
negative and
impact.
positive. So, there will be people who have cost in their mind, rightfully. And, but there are also revenues, it's the seesaw, so it's at what Carl said very well. The fiscal implications.
What I will do is I'll post the PowerPoint version of this. And so you can edit and add and, I could do Google Docs, we can all.
We can't
I don't know if it's
serially
sufficient.
debate though.
We can't do that, you just send it to me,
Yeah.
edit and send it to me and.
But I think for each person's realm, they should anticipate. I don't know, 2 or 3 questions, maybe prepare a slide.
Yeah. I just think that I wanted to keep this relatively brief at a high level and then invite a lot of
Yeah.
questions and then maybe have the backup slides.
Right,
Maybe that's the wrong tack. Maybe we ought to go more deeply into the back. What do we do on November 9th? There's a lot of good stuff on November 9th in terms of the site history and the town involvement. You might want to draw some of that in there, but I didn't want to spend 40 minutes on a presentation.
No, but I think when in the publicity for this, advising people that they can watch that November presentation. It's still out there, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's on the,
On Chris's
Uh,
YouTube channel.
and you could put in a slide that just has, additional resources on the site, on the task force site or something like that, just
Okay,
as the last slide, this is a complex site. It's a lot of issues. We've done a lot of work we couldn't cover here. Here's some of the materials you
Good
can
point.
access. Yeah.
of course, this slide, this one emphasizes Terry's comment in space. Way
Right,
too
yeah,
small.
that's way too small.
Way too small, but I don't need the simple with some of
Yeah.
these, okay, so I just wanted, this is the first shot through this and so
Do we want to
no pride,
plan a
but we-
few people in the audience to ask the question? You're right, you don't want to drag this out. But if there are other things we'd really like a chance to expand on, just invite our significant others to come and raise their
Gonna
hand.
plan some questions. We have select board, we have Megan, we have Chris, we can do a lot of planning.
Yeah, right, no, that's what I mean.
I think
Yeah,
that's,
my wife's not coming.
Follow on to that. Think about our constituencies, stakeholders. Who are the obvious ones who should get an expressed invitation to this?
That was a question I was gonna raise, so I
Okay, to
second.
that point,
neighbors
Importance of
and
that.
planning board and.
to that
finance committee
point,
and so forth,
if I can switch this a little bit to sort
chamber
of
of commerce.
preparations for this. And I think this is, looking at David in terms of
Yeah, communication.
leading it. So, this is, Donna McIntosh just redid this flyer. This is a draft that we can put on this. We did a flyer before, this is. We're gonna discuss reuse options, health risk findings, ownership issues, legal aspects. At here, so this is, the draft of that, but what Donna also, suggested. Is that she suggests the following, so engagement with the bridge. News and notice, on the website, direct mail to boards and committees and outreach,
Mhm.
chairs breakfast, so. I think we need somebody to kind of overall manage this process.
I'm happy to, I mean, it's kind
Could you
of
do
falls
that?
in my bailiwick. Send me this,
Yeah, well, you have, I'll send you
I'll be in
this.
touch with Donna
This is her.
too, yeah.
email. I think these are all good suggestions. I'll take care of the chair's breakfast part and,
We have contact information for people who came to the west to the November 9th.
We got the attendance list, and did they have their emails?
I don't remember.
That's my recollection,
Then we have to
is that
use it.
right, Chris?
Yeah,
I don't know how to
We have
access
to
it.
use it.
yeah, and then I would contact,
Okay.
send the flyer.
so can you follow up on this?
I will.
David, I'd get the mailing list for the conservation coffee and send
It's
it.
not
over.
available.
Mhm.
They, I've asked Delia in the past. They have a policy of not sharing their email list with people with other agendas than the conservation coffee directly.
Okay,
But you
but
could send
They
it to
send
a
a flyer out
chairperson
to
and
the-
ask them to distribute.
The
yeah,
chairperson
there's
is
some
the
private sector organizations there too.
the private sector organizations are, you know, conservation related and I can hunt them down.
Oh,
But Dealey is the chair of that and they do not share their
Okay.
email list.
well, I think if you run down the conservation organizations and we go through the chair's breakfast, we get most of that.
It's been very interesting, just quickly, the health risk aspect, which one would expect the conservation environmental community to be interested in. The people who have come to the conservation coffee meetings are not interested in it. They're interested, and they will be when we start to get close, you know, the Warner's Pond example again. But they're interested in invasive exotics and the bird count and that focus of conservation. So there are people in that group that I think we can, if I could use crudely the word harvest, for sure. But that group generally has not been responsive to our invitations.
And I think they also, David, I think a lot of them are, yeah, it's gonna get pretty clean. It's not a place we want, you know, all for conservation. We don't want the, previously used areas. So, I mean, I think there's potential support there too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't
Have a
forget
June
Board of
meeting.
Health.
Yeah, yes,
Ooh, Board of Health.
Board of Health.
Don't forget the Board of Health.
yeah.
Yeah.
What do you say, what do you think our major, the top three messages should be? We got a lot of slides, we're talking about information, but if you're in the, what do you want to hear from? What do you want to leave that meeting thinking?
Number one, it's complicated. Number two, it's very public. Number three, nothing's gonna happen quickly.
This is a step forward in a process.
I'd say, and the town's doing its homework.
Yeah, you're right, thank you, yeah.
What was that last one?
The town's doing its homework. It's looking
It's
into these
homework.
issues.
Homework, not homework.
Not homework, yes,
Yeah,
homework.
Yeah, I think the last time we talked about thoroughness, I think maybe that's part of doing the homework.
Right, yeah.
I think the town, we are being very thorough in the analysis. We got a lot of help, town council, grew, a lot of resources being thrown, there's been good science on the health.
People were very impressed at the range of expertise that Terry and the select board has put together to be doing the homework on the town's behalf, right?
Yeah.
In our group. To,
I think there's also, assuming the rule report says what we think it's gonna say, I think we need to say that the uses of this site will be determined by economic and municipal priorities, not by the, environmental status of land. It's land, folks. What do you want to do with it?
I believe
good
that's where
point.
we're gonna come out
Yeah.
on this.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that's a conclusion,
No.
but I think it's fair to say, if Rue says what we think they're going to say, we can say that it would appear that this land is safe for most any use that the private or public sector would want to put on it with certain controls.
Yeah, that should be kind of a final message. I'm not sure that's a message
You don't want to go there yet,
at the
but
public.
I think we gotta signal
We're gonna-
it in
we're gonna-
some way.
We're gonna tee that up, because we're gonna present the roof line, which is gonna speak to that, but, we will have just digested that information.
Well, maybe you say something like this. So far as we can see, the science does not suggest there is a barrier to most of the uses in which the town or the private sector may be interested.
there are ways to address this within slide 13, the risk slide. And maybe there's a 13 and a 14 or a subset of slides, but when you ask the question broadly, what do we want the public to come away with out of this? I definitely think it's important for them to hear from us that we are scrupulously looking at safety issues, and we're reassured so far and continuing to look,
So
or
far.
something like that. And there's, the language like to a residential standard, little buzz phrases. But what I would hope the public takes from this meeting is a reassurance that safety is it's looking good and being carefully looked at. Something.
You know, it's interesting, the residential standards at this point are less important than what's gonna be the residual exposure. Because that's what Rue has done is they've taken, you know, the receptors of residents, construction workers, trespass, people that may spend different amounts of time at different parts of the site. And what are they gonna be exposed to from residual contamination, if any? So yes, it's based on residential standards, but at this point, it's like, we're looking at how humans are gonna be,
The health risk from
yeah,
the
how
exposure.
humans are going to interact with the remaining contamination.
So when you explain residential standard, for example, and I'm not married to that particular language, that has a meaning, and what that means is you could live there for 70 years. For your whole life, garden and do all normal activities and not raise your cancer risk by more than 1 in a million, which is a federal safety standard that applies across the board to all sorts of risk issues. It gets into the exposure meaning.
Yeah.
But I'm not married to the language
Yeah.
per se.
Well-
I'm saying that sense that safety is being carefully scrutinized, we're reassured so far, but the scrutiny is continuing. I'd like people leaving the meeting feeling reassured about that. That's all.
So, I'm gonna have to, Terry, you and I are gonna have to talk a bit about, we don't have, I mean, have a half hour at the select board, so you'll have to advise you, what of this does the select board really interested in? Because we can't spend a ton of time on this. I do think the whole timing of this, I think it's important, especially for the new select board members to understand. Although the print, the font should be bigger, that what happens after we submit our report? What happens between when we submit our report and when the town is ready, when the site is ready for somebody to reuse it? What are those steps? 'Cause-
Okay, yep. So let's get together pretty soon because I'm gonna be away the last 10 days of May. And also I think you're gonna put all the slides in the packet and then
Yeah.
just pick the most important ones to show that night and leave a lot of time for questions.
Okay. Should I be terribly concerned about the two new select board members, in terms of coming up to speed? Because the last couple of years, we talked a lot to all you about these issues, so
Right.
the old select board members know a lot more than new ones. Should I be
Well-
concerned about that?
There's one new member that probably is pretty up to speed, but the other one is not. And even the old select board members need a review. It's been a while.
Yeah, definitely.
Terry, does it carry any weight with the select board? Paul will be the speaker, of course, and answer of questions that any of the rest of us are in the audience and there, or just as support, or I don't know how this stuff works. What about others in attendance, as you know?
I think you should, I mean, to the extent you can be there, I think you should, to hear, to listen, to respond.
Well, I'm perfectly eager to, but
Yeah.
again, I'm naive about how to handle all that. What's best?
I think, Paul, you can cue us up. You know,
Yeah, if you're eager to, you should definitely attend. Yeah.
Dave can speak David can speak further to that.
Or whomever, right?
Also,
Okay.
you're probably gonna add a little bit about what happened at the forum. Did you have good turnout? What kind of questions did you get?
Okay. Okay, so your homework is to look at this and give me additions, subtractions, edits, thoughts, etc. I just thought this is, just starting with this would be a good.
That's a great start. Thank you for putting it together.
Number 5, discussion of reuse scenario options. We kind of covered that a little bit in terms of, you know, we have to decide whether we're gonna move down the track of a preferred option, or we want to kind of leave all the scenarios on the table. I think we still have to, if indeed the risk results show that the site is not a health constraint, then I'm wondering if, based on what we've heard, from various users and potential use of needs, whether we can come up with something a little bit more tangible. In that vein, I'm just wondering, so the battery, so a lot of things have changed recently, the whole battery storage part. I'm just wondering if that is still something we ought to be proposing, Rich, because the battery storage now has taken
It's
on.
not
its own-
clear to me that that is the last battery storage the town is gonna put in.
I agree.
And we do know it's next to the substation.
Mhm.
I
Well, the
mean,
new one, the battery storage is gonna be next to the substance.
right, but this is close. So if
Okay.
they need more, I'm not saying it ought to happen, but I think,
We could always say
it's
if
a
necessary.
small use. It can go in a
Right.
corner.
Yeah.
Small amount of land and
But I think all of the town uses are very much tentative at this point, right? Because the town has to complete its facilities planning and
Yeah.
capital budget associated with this. So I think anything we're proposing around town uses is preliminary and illustrative at this point.
It is, but to our earlier discussion, do we have any informed opinions on what that might be? I mean, to Pam's point about DPW, we don't know what their plan is, but it seems pretty interesting to move DPW over there and to create housing in the middle of town. I mean, maybe we don't
Yeah,
have to
but
talk
I
about
mean,
that enough.
had-
Maybe that's too
but-
speculative.
I mean, if we really looked at the site from the perspective of what DPW's facility needs are and what the impact
Yeah,
would be on
Well-
them to recommend that, I mean, I think.
Do they want to be out on the edge of
Well,
town?
even independent of what.
They're
what's-
more open to it than they
Right,
were.
but there's
Yeah, members.
a lot of
the edge
consideration.
of town isn't the edge of town.
I mean, I don't feel comfortable recommending putting DPW there without a lot more information that we've reviewed.
Yeah, fair.
Right.
Court.
And you have to, and in that equation, you have to think about really what are the real options and cost to redevelop this site?
Right.
And what is it going to cost over 20 years to keep DPW here?
I think we're agreed that there's no way we're gonna say, we recommend acquisition because, it would look like this in the future.
Mhm.
That we do some lesser version of, here are the possibilities, pros and cons. I'm thinking it goes in that direction. But just to play out this exercise a little bit more, if you think it's valuable, and shut me down if it isn't. How would we discuss the scenario? We have no idea what we should do with it, but we want to acquire it and we're content with it sitting dormant until we know.
I like that.
But include that there are real
And I mean,
possibilities.
but I mean really
right?
dormant.
But-
What then are the cost implications? It doesn't change the risk implications, I don't think. Or if it does, it reduces them. Because I think some people are eager to couple acquisition with what are you gonna do?
Mhm.
And there is another approach, which is.
Nothing for a while.
We really
Nothing for a
don't know.
Well, but it begs the
And
question.
preserves
why.
options for
You have to
future.
answer why to acquire, it, not just say, we take it away from private developer.
Oh, but I think that's an easy one.
For
Like
some of
Mark
us-
Twain said, buy land, they ain't making any more of it. If you can put 20 acres in your pocket for potential future use, you do it. In general, that's a way of thinking about it. It doesn't have to necessarily have an immediate use. It's an investment in the town's options down the road, an asset.
I would offer another one, which is.
That's one
Gives
possibility.
us a more control than the alternative.
Mhm.
And
Yes,
it's a risk that is gonna be within our borders forevermore, hence we want control. I think a legitimate argument.
I think that is a legitimate
yeah.
argument, Court. I think,
Where it
the
started in
argument
the
would
first
be,
place, really.
the argument would be, okay, subject to negotiations where the costs of entry are pretty low and we're protected. From liability and we have lots of uses. Acquire the site and we'll figure out exactly what to do with it later. Now, that's one thing, but there may be, because everything else, the planning that's going on in town that Terry talked about, it seems that this property needs to be thrown into the planning bucket. We can't wait till 2028 to put it into the planning bucket.
Well, think, what you're talking about here. when StarMet Nuclear Metals or its predecessors came there, it was perfectly legal, perfectly welcome, you know, then Senator Kennedy came and celebrated them moving to Concord.
Yeah.
Nobody was concerned about anything other than, here's a wonderful new operation that's gonna bring technology and employment options and tax revenue to the town of Concord.
Well, I'm concerned about using the term dormant. I don't think I mean, there's very limited, even when you count MCI and this site, very little land you can do much with here that isn't either already residential or conserved. And whether it's, you know, assisted living, for which we know there's demand, recreation, for which there appears to be some demand, housing. I mean, I just don't want to, and I guess as a taxpayer, I'm bothered by spending $250 million to have something just sit there. When we know we don't have enough land to do everything we like to do in this town.
But I think dormant may be, this is a soft way of putting it. Acquire the land and with lots of needs, and we'll figure out what to do with it. I mean, the dormancy is.
As an asset and an investment in the
Dormancy should not be a
future,
permanent situation.
as we work.
Maybe
with
you
our-
Well,
can't make a
temporary.
decision independent of the other
Years.
Yeah, right.
large
That I
Well,
properties.
that is
that are-
absolute
Yeah.
reality.
Which,
So that-
and nobody's gonna have a hard time understanding that.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
Also, acquisition is still, you know, 5 years away, right? I mean, so, you know, we have time before we're actually gonna finalize acquisition, and that there's gonna be more planning and more understanding of what the best use for the town is, right? If there's a land use plan, if the town facility needs have been worked through, well, there'll be clear understanding of the desired uses for that. I think we'll know more, by the end of 4 years, I don't think we'll say, oh, we still don't know what we want to use it for.
Pam's bursting again.
Yeah,
so I have a provocative question here, so, more provocative than yours. And we don't decide this here, I'm just kind of throwing this out. Is there any good reason that we can think of right now to recommend that the town not acquire the site? And what would those reasons be? You know, we started.
move
really-
forward towards acquisition.
What's that?
Move forward towards.
Well,
acquisition.
yeah, that's what I mean, move forward with acquisition. You know, like, is there some stopper right now? I mean, it could be a stopper. It could be $10 million that we can't afford to, you know, could be a stopper, but are there any stoppers
To
to come?
move forward toward acquisition doesn't have a price tag on
Sorry.
it yet. The possibility of the price tag making it preclusive for what the town ultimately wants to do is down the road.
Yeah, but that's not our decision.
That's correct.
Our recommendations was to move down the road.
I'm saying, you know, you're asking, is there a stopper to thinking about this some more, but starting to do so in a more active way, pursuing the negotiations or getting them started? I don't see an obstacle to suggesting
I mean,
that.
I thought if the federal lien was non-negotiable, or even if the Citizens Bank, it was 10 million, that would give me pause to recommend that, you know, this is gonna cost you 10 million. We don't know, we don't have enough information on either one of those.
Town needs to
At
get
this
that.
point.
I mean, we
We
might
could
get
get
to a
the-
point with the terms of acquisition or,
Right,
you know, or a red light.
yeah.
We gotta
We're not there
continue
yet.
with the process to find that out.
Well, and the other
Right.
thing, you know, if we find out somehow that the site isn't being cleaned up. I don't know how we find that, you know, if through monitoring everything else, I can't imagine. There'd be evidence that the site would not be cleaned up to meet the cleanup goals, but that'd be another thing, the site's not gonna be clean.
For what the federal government is spending on it. There better be some evidence that it's working.
Well, I know, and,
But then we wouldn't get that swarm.
I don't
of
know if Kara's still here, I don't, yeah, I agree, I mean, there's, yeah, I just,
But
Provocative.
to your point, we are gonna hear from somebody. We're cleaning up to contemporary standards. Well, it was clean to contemporary standards 50 years ago too.
Mhm.
Nobody knows what those standards will be in 50 years hence.
Right.
We're gonna hear that. And
But we
the
have-
answer is true. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't.
We don't know.
to get back to the question you raised initially here for this conversation, which is how do we address recommended potential uses? We're dancing around that. I still think we need to say that we did our research with a few potential scenarios in mind, which allowed our research to focus on this, the implications of those, but they're only models. We think there are reasons why some are more feasible or the town might find preferable. You're looking for which ones our wisdom prefers, right? Like getting started on the negotiations earlier because the EPA said we could have a say in what's happening with the site. The research on who wants to develop it, how, guides. So here's one of the scenarios, and our feedback and our research said that's more likely, et cetera. But I don't think we need to be, I think acquiring it as an asset with future uses to be determined in the context of ongoing town planning is a broad scenario. These other three are broad scenarios, and I don't think we need to go into much more detail or urging than that.
Okay, it's interesting to be continued. Hi, sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So I just wanted to point out, if you're talking about the undetermined use idea. So if you asked for the town to acquire it so that the conservation areas can be, and trails can be set up for use and connected to our trails, and that the area A1 could be leveled for future building as part of their restoration. So that we want it flat, we don't want it with trees planted and bumps and things like that. We want it ready to build on.
Great big pollinator
Great
garden.
big, and the pollinator garden. The advantage of doing it that way is that people will use it for recreation in the meantime. People will use the conservation areas and will get more comfortable with the idea of having this in their community while they're coming up with the, well, what do we do now that Peabody needs these renovations? What do we do? And they'll think about whether they just want to put trucks on top of this flat area, which isn't the best use necessarily of $250 million of cleanup, or they want to put buildings that'll get used, either leased or used by the town or whatever. Not-
But here's a recommendation to build on that and courts.
I think
The
it's a
town
very-
acquires the land as an asset for future use, but some of it can be used sooner rather than later for
Right.
these particular uses.
So there are some immediate benefits. I think that's what you
Yeah.
sort of
I
pointed
think
out.
the
There are
phase,
some
you
immediate
suggested kind of
benefits.
phasing, which I really
Great
think
big
is
parking lot.
really interesting.
Interesting.
That was
idea,
part
yeah.
of the reuse plan originally, was
Yeah.
commented that people are more comfortable with the risks if they can phase into it and get used to the idea.
And towns that we researched fell not in love with, but comfort with their hazardous waste sites when conservation use became readily available. I'm thinking of Ashland, I'm thinking of the
Mhm.
Louisiana site. That's a model from our research that showed that having that use was appealing and a selling point for the town to think about moving forward on
Yeah.
figuring out what's next.
It's
So
a
we
bit,
That's land that we
have the three
don't see as
options.
being used.
yeah, I don't want to speak for Delia. Very early on, we heard that NRC was really interested in the bog part of this and
Sure.
connecting to the trail. Very,
Of course, they don't,
even if nothing else happened at the site, they're very interested because there's some real,
well, they don't
real
want any
natural
further,
resource value.
further compromise or damage to what right now is pretty much okay.
Yeah,
So that's an interesting potential suggested.
And that covers all
It's a
three
phase-
of
it's a
the
phase.
options that
Right,
involve us
right,
owning
yeah.
it.
Right.
Right.
Right,
Rich.
Yeah, I'm concerned about, people getting used to this all being open space, not the conservation land, the whole thing being open. You then want to come back, you want to build housing, you want to build a rec center, whatever. You're gonna get a lot of pushback against that. I'm not saying we should come forward now and say we want assisted living or whatever. But I think, I really worry about everybody just saying, oh, well, it's all gonna be open space. Because I think it gets very, very hard to take that back.
You're then
When you
taking
have
it back.
municipally owned.
That's why it's
Municipally
hard
owned.
to have to mow.
Right, and
That
it
would be an
doesn't
expense.
have any value as open space, really. I mean, it actually,
Well,
It does in people's minds.
it does in people's
Exactly.
minds.
Yeah.
That's what worries me.
Because it becomes a taking back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
A clawing back.
right, you know, how
Rectangular
dare you
fields
build
on open
housing
space.
on, you know,
That might-
on the place where I let my dog run,
Yeah.
where I play ultimate frisbee.
Yeah.
I want to just mention one, since our last meeting, we had a discussion with an interesting developer, called Edge Sports.
Oh, this idea. Mary said she was intrigued that you had kind of championed the possibility
Well,
in my
yeah,
conversation with her.
because I've double hatted Recreation Commission and this.
Yeah, and she appreciated that.
And it's indoor recreation. So we actually spoke with them and they're interested theoretically, because they build in cooperation with municipalities. This is their model. They get, town gives them land as lease and they build a recreation facility. And it'd be very attractive. There's the downside of that we found out is they won't build a fossil fuel free facility. Because they can't do it. They can't, the economics aren't. So there's a sticking point. But as a taxpaying developer to meet recreational needs, it's intriguing. And, in addition to housing. I went back to them, Rich, and I said, well, if not fossil free, can you do a carbon neutral so we can, a sustainable? So they might think, and they had some examples so they could do that, but they can't do a fossil.
I'll tell you something very interesting about
They
that.
do it now.
That's not gonna be an
Can't do it
impediment in
now.
Concord,
You don't think so?
because the federal court has ruled that Berkeley's attempt to go fossil free with its rules that ours are modeled on is illegal. The federal government does not allow localities to dictate what fuels it can control. It can say, we want a certain amount of emissions reduction or greenness or whatever. But it's specific, the Ninth Circuit, the liberal Ninth Circuit has thrown out Berkeley's fossil-free rule, which our state model and Concord's is based on. I've had conversations with Alice Kaufman, who's a big champion about this. So I'm not sure that fossil-free is
I
gonna remain.
see that point of view. pretty
impediment.
clearly. However, we do have a fossil-free demonstration. We have a bylaw in town that would have.
Yes, what I'm saying is that exact bylaw or pretty
It's a
close to it has been thrown out.
Well,
But
somebody had
it's
to
our
challenge it.
contract with them.
Somebody had to challenge it or
Yeah,
else it,
guess who challenged it on the West
I
Coast?
mean,
or else it could be a waiver. If there's a benefit, if there's enough.
the economics of it may also be different, by the
Yeah,
time.
The fossil fuel companies challenge it there. They're likely to challenge it here. I would be surprised if it sticks in Massachusetts.
Anyway.
Anyway.
Because I have a,
Just very
I
side
have
thing.
I have a bee in my bonnet on this and I'm gonna keep engaged with them and just.
Yeah,
As this thing
It's cool.
develops, because.
They can do
Yes,
carbon
Rich, go
neutral.
ahead.
Yeah, no, the only other caveat that I heard in that discussion, when they sent us the models that they had, almost all of them had ice rinks. And it's pretty clear that that's one of the major
Oh, gosh.
revenue generators. And we know what the problem is, if there's an ice rink across. And they said, we don't know whether we're interested, but we have to do the market research, because they need to see, they go around all the, private sports teams and schools and say, are you missing, I'm thinking of you and your soccer playing kid, Pam, but, how much do you pay for field time? How constrained are you by the lack of fields, et cetera? And what would you pay? So, it's,
It might not-
They didn't know
might
about
not-
that.
it might not
They have to
work.
run their business model, but they have other facilities which are just indoor track, basketball courts, community
But-
centers.
And it's how there's a rink across the street
Yeah,
already.
and they
know
know that Thoreau Club is down the street and Valley Sports is over here. They're not about.
Anyway, cool possibility.
It's exactly, that's why I brought it up. It's another developer
But
possibility.
I just
In
go
addition
back
to
to
housing.
Rich's earlier point, I do think it's important for the committee to recommend that while we might not have a preferred scenario, our preferred scenario is that the land be put into use, for some need in the town. And not that the whole site be used for conservation.
Yeah, and the middle ground between dormancy and put into use is sort of.
Well,
to-
phased,
to throw-
it's all right
throw
to
the site-
say
Throw the site to the
Phased, yeah.
bucket of planning.
phased, but
Aside.
phased to be reused for some town need.
I'm sensing we have consensus around that
Right,
idea.
there you go. Yep, this is great. I love provocative comments coming right and left. I think that is all on the upcoming meetings, so we have the 28th is our next meeting, which will be a combination of the task force, excuse me, the public forum, convergence and the RU risk discussion. And between now and then, please give me comments on that, and let's start on the outreach. Start thinking about. the
Yeah, so
outreach.
tomorrow I'll get in touch with Donna.
Yeah, I'll send you that email.
Please, yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
And
Yes.
so, Court,
Should we be thinking about a site visit with select board? Before or after our meeting with them on the 17th?
I think that would be,
I think, Cypher, the FinCom also. By the way, Kathy Cutolo
Yeah,
is our rep. I spoke with
Oh,
her.
good.
She couldn't make this meeting. She could make the next
She's the
meeting.
FinCom
She's the Fin-
liaison thing.
Yeah, because I was, ever since Parashar asked me for capital budget, I said, we need a FinCom rep. That was 6 months ago, and they're finally doing it, so. Good, it's a new chair, so we'll have somebody from FinCom at these.
so we need to get her a packet, so she's up to speed on, maybe just on our presentations.
I showed her the website. I
Beautiful.
said, this, you got meeting packets galore, and we have presentations.
Well,
there.
and one or the other, you or whoever of us could sit down and offer to have a cup of coffee and an hour-long conversation, so she doesn't have to face the daunting task of reading Norrells and Swarrels and learning all that crap, you know. It makes sense of the background information to handhold a little, but that's.
So I think a site visit probably early June before the
I think that'd be
17th,
great.
something. Let's talk about that. Bruce et al. Are always receptive to doing that. And I know Terry loves going to the site for the, I don't know, time.
Gonna come back from Norway with great stories, huh, Terry?
Yeah, well, that's
Um,
not going until July,
Okay, good.
but,
Okay,
visit is great. And, when you, are going to be inviting, boards and committees to the forum, is that all boards and committees? I saw it on the list. Don't forget FinCom, Board of Health,
Nope, they all came up.
yeah, all of them.
yeah, well, let's do it multiple ways. I'll reach out to at the chairs break, I'll reach out to the chairs of those new committees. We'll let them know what's going on. Do we have any Kara, I saw you went live on your.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi, so I summarized everything at the end. I thought this might be easier. So a couple of comments and then a few questions. One, the meeting packet for this meeting was not posted on the website, just an FYI. If someone wants to look into that and have it posted, it's not there. The next meeting, did you just say it was May 28th on a Tuesday?
Yes,
That's the date. Okay. And so I guess I just wanted to follow up because I've had some emails with Chris about this, but there's a discussion of having EPA and DeMaximus having a meeting with RU before any of the risk assessment results are presented. And that meeting is tentatively scheduled for June 5th. So I just wanted to follow up on that. If there's some discussion about having a RU meeting, RU presenting on the 28th, I think that is a concern of mine, having them present their findings before confirming that the data that they used in their risk assessment and the assumptions that they integrated are in alignment with the information that we provided with them.
I think the 20th is sort of a briefing on where they haven't written their report. You're saying you're concerned about putting the cart before the horse, kind of.
Exactly. I mean, that's been one of our big concerns. There's so many assumptions in the process, and we provided them with a lot of data that I want to make sure that, everything got translated in the way we expected it to be translated. And it's not being built on kind of a rocky foundation. I'm not expecting it to be. I just,
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I think they've given us progress briefings that David, Kurt, myself, and I'm not too concerned about a briefing. If they have to change things and come back. So it's not until they write the report, until we use their information, it's not final. So, but I think we wanted to get, start merging the reuse piece into the risk piece. So that was the timing for that. So what is your meeting with them is what on June 6th?
currently tabled for June 5th.
Yeah.
The day after the public forum. So this is where my just scheduling these dates. And again, this might be a conversation for me to have with Chris offline. I just wanted to kind of bring it up here
Yeah.
while I had various
Um,
parties in attendance.
I hear you.
Or, and then just a general site update just for 2 seconds. So EPA distributed a fact sheet. Hopefully you all received a copy of it. If you did not, reach out to me. I can send you one. And really that fact sheet was just a statement that we started the next phase of excavation at the site. So we've moved into a new area, and that work is now underway between now and November of this year. So we're back out there every day and digging.
I think that everybody got that. I got it from you and I sent it to everybody that on the EPA's fact sheet. I think you got that.
Great.
Yeah, not that everybody always looks at every email I send them, but it's there.
And
We wait for them with
Yes,
bated breath.
yes. When's Paul gonna hit us with another?
Oh,
Um,
excuse me, I can't make my other meeting at
Sorry,
work.
Kara, what else you got?
Yep. And the last one is, what is just the date for your select board briefing?
17th of June, unless that's changed, but I think that's the date I've been given.
Got it. Okay.
And that's, that's just an update on where we are. That's nothing, and we're gonna do a final briefing when we get our report out later on, so, so this is all still in progress.
All right. Yep. Those were all of mine.
Okay,
All
good.
right.
Kara, thanks for being at all these meetings with us.
Yes, right.
Yes,
Yes,
really.
thank you.
I find it a very reassuring presence.
My thanks to your family too.
Yeah, yeah, it's your life.
They're
you know.
upstairs.
The EPA doesn't pay overtime, last I heard, so thank you.
Nope. But yep.
She's just
anytime
monitoring
it's
the
good to be.
federal lien on the site.
Yeah. She wants a slice of that windfall that we're gonna make.
Terry, your hand is raised. Wow, you're dark too. Wow.
I just want to give a quick shout out to the Oversight Committee. Pam Rockwell and that whole team is
Yeah,
the, overseeing all of the cleanup. And you folks were talking a few minutes ago about, is there any reason why not to recommend it? Well, several months ago, I don't remember the details, but there were some changes in how deep the soil was gonna, how much soil was gonna go on top of the
Basin.
The
Yeah.
cat,
Oh, yeah.
all of those safety issues that come up. And the Oversight Committee is, asked a lot of questions about it and is really making sure that the cleanup is happening the way we think it is. So thanks to all of them.
Well, yeah,
Share.
to put a exclamation on that, one of the assumptions that the cleanup is gonna be completed as proposed, and while I'm sure EPA is gonna do that, we're dependent on the town, the PAM's committee to look over the shoulders,
people might.
as they have been doing since 2000 and what?
2001,
Three?
2002.
Well, whenever the committee is formed.
I've had important people in town say, we don't trust the EPA, but we trust our local citizens to be watching over their shoulder. So in terms of the acceptance of all of this and the comfort and the trust, all of those relationship things, your work has been vital.
Yeah,
Let the minutes
I,
reflect.
do not share that lack of trust as a scientist or an observer of EPA and DeMaximus over the years, but.
I would echo that, but I would also say people who know less trust trust people they know.
Mhm.
So it's helpful to have every resource here and a local one in that role.
I can't tell you how many projects they've been involved with where the public says, why should we trust EPA? I mean, how do you answer that?
Well, here's a case study. Here's why.
Well, there are thousands of
Or
case studies.
the
in this
answer is
country.
ask Pam.
Yeah,
Well, the answer is, we didn't. Essentially, we said, we're gonna watch. We're not just gonna say we trust them. So the question's been answered and by trustworthy local residents. So it's a great tool in my mind in terms of
Yeah.
communicating about all these risk and concern issues.
it's not, it's not a debatable
Yeah,
point,
it's awesome.
but central to what EPA does is community involvement, and so they expect that and they want that, so. I'm not a defender of EPA, I'm just, It's a team, all right?
So I do want to point out that EPA has been a great partner in this. I mean, what the advantage of watching is that not only can I see what I want them to do that maybe they're not thinking about, but I can also see the things that they have jumped right on, like the new levels for 1,4-dioxane, taking responsibility for that, changing things, getting it going as fast as possible, getting the pump and treat set up and working long before the rest of the site work was
Being proactive on
being
PFAS.
proactive on all of these things that changed while it was happening and advocating for us. And so that is something I'm really grateful for. And it's nice, it's comforting to see that when I'm trying to predict the future of whether they will do that if something comes down the road in 30 years.
I agree with all that. I think Kara's back is getting sore with all the back, we're patting her on the back for all this great stuff. But it is true. But we have a ways to go to reach the finish line here. I think this is a really good meeting. I'm really glad how we're kind of getting in the deliberation stage. When we have our other three members here, it'll be even more lively. So, you got a little homework to do. See you on the 28th.
Do we know
And-
where we're meeting on the
On
20th?
The
I kind of like this room.
I think it's the town,
Working's easy.
May 20th is the townhouse, and I don't know why that meeting packet, Shannon told me it was posted. Chris, I don't know why, what happened, maybe she posted on some other website. I'll get that posted, should have been there, I didn't check. Okay, meeting is adjourned, thank you very much,
Thank you.
good discussion.